In September of 2022, something exploded under the Baltic Sea. 3 pipelines torn open on the ocean floor, gas bubbling to the surface for days. Everyone assumed they knew who did it. They were wrong. For 50 years, Germany built its entire industrial identity on Russian gas. Cheap, steady, and everyone believed safe. That belief turned out to be one of the most expensive miscalculations in modern European history. And the story of how it happened isn't really about pipelines at all. It's about what happens when a country convinces itself that trade is the same thing as trust.
If you've ever wondered why your energy bill jumped, why made in Germany suddenly got more expensive, or why a war 6,000 kilometers away touched your own household budget, this is where that story actually starts. And most of it, the storage games, the backdoor gas still flowing today, the identity of who actually blew up those pipelines, never made it into the headlines you read at the time. Go back to February 1970, Essen, West Germany. Snow on the ground, champagne in the glasses. West German officials and Soviet delegates sign a deal that, on paper, looks almost boring. Germany sends steel pipes east, the Soviets send gas west. But nobody in that room thought of it as boring. They called it a contribution to peace. This was the heart of something called Ostpolitik, the idea, championed by Willy Brandt, that you don't fight your enemies into changing. You trade with them. You tie your economy to theirs so tightly that war becomes bad business. Change through rapprochement, they called it. And for a while, it looked like it was working. Soviet leaders liked the idea too, for their own reasons. Internal records later showed the Politburo understood exactly what this trade would do. It would tie West Germany's interests to Moscow's year after year, contract after contract. Both sides thought they were the one playing the long game. By the 1980s, Soviet gas was flowing steadily into German homes and factories, even when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, even when Washington offered American coal and nuclear technology instead. Germany said no. The pipeline kept running. A Soviet official once pitched it as the biggest pipeline in the world, built to last 35 years. He wasn't far off. Here's what almost nobody talks about. In the autumn of 2021, months before a single tank crossed into Ukraine, Gazprom made a decision. It quietly let its German storage facilities run dry. One of the largest, a site called Redden, sat almost empty heading into winter. Think about that. A slow, deliberate squeeze. Not a blockade, not a headline, just less gas than usual, month after month, while everyone in Berlin assumed it was a market blip. It wasn't a blip. It was leverage, being loaded, quietly, 6 months before the war even started. By the time tanks actually moved, the pressure was already built in. To understand why Germany didn't see it coming, or didn't want to, you have to understand what it had already given up. In 2000, Germany decided to shut down every nuclear plant in the country. 20% of its electricity gone by design. Coal was next on the list. And when you take nuclear off the table and coal off the table, something has to fill that gap. In Germany, that something was gas. Not a preference, a necessity. So when Gerhard Schroeder signed the Nord Stream 1 deal with Vladimir Putin in September 2005, routing gas straight across the Baltic Sea, bypassing Poland and Ukraine entirely, it wasn't just a business decision. It was Germany writing its own dependency into the foundation of its energy grid. Weeks later, Schroeder left the chancellorship. Weeks after that, he became chairman of the company running the pipeline he'd just approved. Later, he'd take a seat on Rosneft's board too. Industry cheered. German chemical and manufacturing lobbies pushed hard for exactly this outcome. Cheap, steady gas meant cheap, competitive exports. And after the Fukushima disaster in 2011, Angela Merkel accelerated the nuclear shutdown even further, closing the door on any alternative before it could reopen. She inherited the pipeline arrangement and defended it again and again. After Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, after Russia poisoned an opposition leader in 2020, every time the same line.
This is purely economic, politics and pipelines kept separate. At least, that's what Germany told itself.
February 24th, 2022. Russian tanks cross into Ukraine. And within days, the story Germany had been telling itself for 50 years collapses in real time. 55%. That's how much of Germany's gas came from Russia the year before the invasion. One country, one pipeline network. 55% of the fuel keeping German factories running, German homes warm, German industry alive. Chancellor Olaf Scholz freezes Nord Stream 2 days before the invasion. Then, in front of the Bundestag, he calls it a Zeitenwende, a turning point in history. 50 years of strategy, undone in a single speech.
Poland had warned about this for years, calling the pipeline a corridor built above their heads. Ukraine had warned too. It stood to lose a shield and roughly $1 billion a year in transit fees. Now, both warnings stopped being theoretical. Now here's where this stops being a story about Germany and starts being a story about you.
Because when Russia cut the gas flow that summer, first to 40%, then 20%, then nothing, the effects didn't stay in Germany. Wholesale gas prices in Europe hit levels nearly 10 times normal. Energy bills climbed everywhere the grid was connected. Chemical plants that make fertilizer, plastics, medicine ingredients, the raw material behind thousands of everyday products, suddenly cost more to run.
If you've bought a car, a phone, fertilizer for a farm, or even bread in the last few years, some tiny fraction of that price traces back to a decision made in a Baltic pipeline route. That's what energy dependency actually looks like up close. It isn't abstract. It shows up on a receipt. It's not just a past tense story either. Germany's supposed to have banned Russian gas outright, but Russian LNG has been quietly rerouted through French and Belgian ports, and by 2024, it's still made up between 3 and 9% of German supply. The ban exists on paper. The molecules found a workaround.
Think about what that means for the next decade, for you, wherever you're watching this. Whole industries are being built around who controls the energy and materials your country can't produce itself. That's not just a German problem. So here's a question worth sitting with. If your country built its entire economy on one supplier, one pipeline, one relationship, would you have noticed before the war started? Or would you have trusted the cheap gas, the way Germany did for 50 years?
And then, the twist almost nobody saw coming. For years, the assumption was simple. Russia blew up its own pipelines, one last act of intimidation. But by 2025, German investigators built a different case entirely. A 7-person team, a yacht called Andromeda, chartered out of the German port of Rostock using forged documents. The alleged coordinator, a Ukrainian former intelligence officer known publicly only as Serhiy K., arrested in Italy in 2025, formally indicted in Germany in 2026. Not Russia, an ally. Acting, investigators allege, to make certain that pipeline could never be turned back on, that no future Berlin government could ever again choose cheap gas over solidarity. Ukraine's government denies any official role. The case is still before German courts, but the theory alone rewrites who this story is actually about. And the economic apocalypse everyone warned about? It never came. BASF's own chief executive, Martin Brudermüller, said cutting Russian gas would destroy German prosperity, bring the worst crisis since World War II. Weeks later, his own company had cut its gas use nearly in half, importing ammonia from its American plants instead of making it at home, and posted stronger guidance to investors.
Researchers at Brookings later found something almost funny about the whole panic. Just 300 specific products account for 90% of Germany's industrial gas use. So instead of collapsing, factories simply imported those products from elsewhere, importing the gas, essentially, already baked into the goods. German GDP dipped less than 0.5% that winter. Households cut usage by 17%, industry by 26%. No blackouts, no collapse. Just adaptation, faster and quieter than anyone with something to lose wanted to admit. 55 years after Willy Brandt first imagined that trade could replace war, the pipes are silent at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Ukraine let its own transit contract with Russia quietly expire in January 2025, ending a gas relationship older than most of the people watching this.
Nobody signed a document to end it. Nobody stood at a podium. It just stopped. The way most eras actually end, not with a declaration, but with an absence nobody bothers to fill anymore. If this kind of story, quiet decisions that end up shaping entire economies, is what you want more of, consider subscribing. There's more of this history underneath the headlines.